Well, Edie, thanks again for joining me here today. So lovely to be speaking with you. Tell us a little bit about your background in the grief work that you do and like how you got started there.
Alex, there's a point in someone's life where you get an internal knock. It's like a calling, if you will. And that calling is something that no matter how much you want to put it away and you want to say, no, I'm going to ignore you. I really don't want to go down this path. I would say that my journey with grief really had that sense to it, that sensibility to it. There are times in one's life that what happened in one's life causes them to stop what they're doing, reassess, and say, maybe I'm supposed to be going down this path and not that path. And when I was 27, my partner died from lung cancer, and at 27, I really had nowhere to go. I tried some therapy and I just found it to be empty and laden with just commentary that was not helpful. I went to groups and again, I found the commentary to be unhelpful. A lot of men and women in these groups who were older and really dealing with the loss of their partners after 30 and 40 and 50 years of marriage. And, my partner and I had been together for 2 years. And all their messaging was, seemed to be was, you're young and you're gonna, you'll find someone. And it didn't address my pain, and it didn't address the lost hope of what an ongoing relationship would be. It was in those moments, those incredibly desperate, scary moments where I sometimes felt like I was meeting a call to just end it all, that I realized that if I didn't wasn't going to end it all, that I needed to start something. And that was really the beginning of this journey and conversation with grief that then awakened within me stories that were part of my life that I had put away, shut down. I don't know if it's by choice, but certainly forgot. There's a certain kind of amnesia, just self protection. And so dealing with the loss of my partner started to bring up some of the traumatic imprints that just took me away from me, and started also the journey into what is trauma and grief, how do they align. And again, just chose I'm not gonna go down the traumatic imprint path, but let me just focus on what is grief and what does grief mean to me, and how do I see it, and how do I want to define it, and what feels real. And so that's my journey.
Yeah. If someone were to ask me, how would you define grief? I think I'd not have a great answer for that person. For me, it would just be like, and grief means a loss, I guess. How do you define grief?
Well, I see grief kind of the minute the umbilical cord is cut, that there's a grief there. I mean, who wants to leave a warm, like, inviting womb and come out into the world with a slap on the butt, or however we come in? And yes, may perhaps go into the loving arms of your mom, and that relationship that then begins, that's ever so precious. So it is a loss, but is it the loss of a loved one? No. And often we define grief as the loss of a loved one, and that loved one is kind of forever gone. At least their presence is, but not the memory of them. Okay, the memory of them is not forever gone. And so I see loss, I see grief. The way that I define it is it's a yearning for that which you cannot replace. It's a hunger for more of what you lost. And so that might be the loss of connection, the loss of having your loved one at the dinner table with you and having that loved one sit with you and laugh with you and cry with you and mourn with you, and the loss of that. You hunger for it, for that to return, for that person to return. And that's grief. Is It's a hunger, it's a yearning for that which you cannot replace. And that can fit, yes, the loss of a loved one, but it can replace the loss of a limb, the loss of a job, the loss, frankly, of your hair. I mean, I call them the big G's and the little G's, and the little G's might be the loss of hair, but it could be a big G for some people because it affects your personal identity and it affects the way that you see yourself in the world. And when we deal with grief and we deal with the intensity of those losses, which can be filled with shame and humiliation or silence or the inability to have a voice around whatever it is you're feeling, or not even able to grasp what it is that you're feeling or have the words to describe. So many people say to me in groups that I'm leading or one-on-one, Edy, I just I can't describe what it is that I feel. But what I feel is so intense and it sometimes cripples me. Sometimes these are now my words, but I give these words, these images as a way to help people manifest their own explanation for what's going on for them. So there's like a phantom pain, right? And we talk about phantom pain when there's a loss of a limb, but I believe that grief in and of itself is like a phantom pain that no one around you can see or feel or identify. But meanwhile, you're walking around with it.
Yeah, they can't see it or identify it. And I think in society, there's polite emotions that are allowed to be expressed, and then some emotions which are not so welcome in company. I think grief is one of those. Part of it, I think, is just people don't know how to comfort or approach a person who's grieving.
Right.
And then for the person who is grieving, there's an understanding that if you feel this way, it's not something that you should probably express so openly. The last time we talked about this, I remember asking you, is there, I remember asking you in almost a clinical way, is there like a standard process, standard procedure of like what grief looks like, or
Yeah.
what maybe we can, if we are grieving, are there things we can look out for to know that we're doing better? And you gave me like the perfect answer, like it's as unique as your thumbprint. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Sure. The way that you're going to grieve, Alex, is very different than the way that I'm going to grieve. And how we grieve, the way it filters within our bodies, within our souls, within our spiritual relationship to whatever the spiritual world is for you. The way that our souls or our psyches responds to grief is so different based on how you grew up, your support system, your community, your sense of socialization, your ability to bounce back in life when something happens. No one grieves exactly the same way, which is your question is like saying, so I'm going to be traveling into the mountains. Can you tell me, will it snow? Will it rain? Will I find an ice storm? Will there be a tornado? And it's like, well, it's the mountains and anything is possible. And it's true. Grief is like that. Grief is, for some people, is like the tsunami. And the tsunami that comes and absolutely chokes the life out of you. And it's hard to stand, it's hard to fight it, it's hard to like say, I'm gonna walk into this. And then there are other parts of that tsunami when before it really hits, all of the force kind of goes out and it looks kind of calm and an eerie kind of, and one can experience their grief just in that way. And it's nonlinear. not my term, but it's nonlinear, meaning it doesn't follow a course that we can rely on because there are activators out there that, like our sense of smell, like all of our senses, what we see, what we hear, what we feel, that can, on one hand, give us a respite from the grief, but also activate the grief. Like there's someone that just walks by me and they remind me their walk is like my mom's walk, or their walk is like the predator's walk that hurt you. Or, and because grief has so many different layers, so many different ways of showing up. And so I'll say, you're going to do your grief your way. Let's figure out the ways that are going to be best for you when there's activation that occurs. And depending on, are you an introvert, an extrovert, an ambivert? You know, are you more social? Are you less social? Are you, a person that wants to believe I'm going to do this on my own? Or are you going to say I'm going to get some help? Or do you believe that no one can help and no one's going to be on your side around this, and so you're going to conquer it on your own? And they're all right.
Yeah, to me, grief is one of the more surprising emotions that can be triggered almost randomly, like I'm not expecting it.
That's right.
With happiness, it could be like, a childhood song comes on or,
Absolutely. And we
you
don't think
know,
anything of that, right?
yeah,
There we are, we're singing along,
yes.
we're remembering we heard that song on a first date with our first crush, and it brings back a flood of delicious memories, and there we are, like really enjoying this. And then it can serve up similarly around grief, and it's not so delicious. Instead, it just brings you into a place of some darkness, some mourning, some yearning, hungering, and that sense of kind of a deprivation of the spirit because you want that person back, or you want the touch back, or you you want to go back to a time when you were healthy,
Yeah,
because
to
there's
me,
grief when you lose your health.
grief feels like if you've ever dropped food coloring into like a glass of water
Mm-hmm.
and that, maybe like a dark blue or something, and the emotions just kind of slowly engulf the clarity, the clearness, and there's just now like this darker color there that's
Right.
just appeared out of nowhere.
That's right.
How, if grief is unique for everybody, how would I know, or how would someone know, like, oh, I think I'm processing this better than yesterday or like a year ago or 10 years ago?
When you look at a cut and you see that that cut that you've put a bandage on is beginning to heal, how do you know?
I guess it's not bleeding anymore, right? If there's an infection, there's no infection. Maybe there's a scar that's grown over there. It doesn't hurt anymore. Like the pain is gone.
Mm-hmm.
But the vestige of that damage is there still. And I don't need a bandage anymore. Like, oh, I don't need the
Right.
band-aid anymore.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. So everything that you just described, we can liken to what dancing with grief looks like and integrating the process, because it's not about closure as far as I'm concerned, because I don't want to forget the people I've lost. I want to learn how to have them in the folds of my heart and my gut, but not have it destroy me in such a way that I feel like I'm just shut down and I can't move. So if the grief initially, and again, the multiple layers of grief that we've talked about, but if you are feeling like you're not thinking straight, your brain is feeling incredibly chaotic, you want to sleep all the time, or you're not sleeping at all, you're using food to anesthetize you, or you're starving yourself so maybe you can feel something like hunger, like real hunger, or not feel anything at all. When when you can laugh and not feel guilty for laughing, where the having some joy in life is you've given yourself the permission to do so, or you begin to see colors in ways that you haven't seen colors in a long time, because there are so many aspects of one's life that can become muted or black and white, if you will, or grayscale when you're grieving. And again, it's all different kinds of grief. And it's grief can be like a prison. And one never forgets the prison that they've been in, but they can also begin to temper the pain through the liberation of being able to experience joy, being able to take care of their bodies, exercising again, cooking for themselves, enjoying grandchildren or relationships, or wanting to have an intimate relationship again, or maybe for the first time. So there's so many different ways, to
I,
recognize a shift and growth and little steps, the tiny moments.
Edie, I love your prison imagery because it sounds like there's no longer a sense of being enclosed off from your freedom to truly live a fulfilling life.
Held
And that
captive.
held captive, yes. And that makes it so much easier for me to understand like
Okay.
that's how progress is or what
Mhm.
progress could look like.
And that's for you. And I've put it into this language because I think that it can be understood, but understand that what the prison is made of, how one exists in that prison, is going to be as individual as their fingerprint. So the way that you imagine a prison or the way that I imagine a prison may be very different.
Yes.
How you are held captive is going to be very different. And if we even like take a look at the hostages that get released, everyone has a different experience. How they talk about it, how they relate to it, whether they talk about it, how they survived, how they kept their sensibility, how they continued to hold on to their souls, their psyches, their intelligence, their humor. And so, and then there are others who just crash and can't. It's not, and when I say they can't, they just lose all sense of their identities. They're personal, they're social, they're certainly sexual. So not everyone walks the same path.
What sort of exercises, if someone just is the first day working with you, what kind of things or exercises would you do with them to kind of help them process? I know there was a couple you mentioned last time, and I was just even imagining it, and it was so powerful for me. So, can you talk through some of those exercises?
So I have a question. So was there one that was especially powerful for you?
Yes, it was the imaginary conversation you would have with whatever or whoever you're grieving.
Mm-hmm.
And the way I was processing and thinking about it as to why it was powerful is because this, for me, this would be my mom. There were things in life that were not able to be discussed, either because of her own beliefs of not believing it was important to discuss those things or not wanting to. And there's something about imagining if that conversation was possible, like what it would look like and how it would feel.
Yeah.
And so that to me is super powerful to have that to be able to in the flesh live that imaginary circumstance where you're able to connect with the person the way you want to.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that here. And I
Yeah.
can feel the emotion right there with you in the room right now, because we can't force an emotion. It's organic, right?
Hmm.
And the idea that that allowed you to access something within you that was so powerful and that you can access anytime. And so, for all of you who are listening, what Alex and I talked about was the idea of creating a letter or even a dialogue between yourself and the one you've lost, and imagining what you would want to say and imagining how they might respond, and creating a dialogue around the feelings of their loss, or of your feelings of what you're missing most and how they might respond. One, but also because this is, in a way, it's a dialogue, that you can also create a response from your loved one that might be different than the way they would have responded, and to play around with those responses, because they may not, they may have wanted to respond to you the way you needed to be responded to, but they may not have had their own emotional access to doing such a thing. And so there's a repair on a lot of different levels, being able to do this kind of monologue, dialogue, interaction with the one you've lost. And sometimes it's just a love letter to the one you've lost. And one of the things that you and I talked about, in our pre-interview, was the idea of calendar markers and what to do for the year. You mark the calendar, an anniversary, the date of birth, the date of death, birthdays, times that perhaps you would travel once a year and it was the same time every year. And you mark it on the calendar because the body is going to remember anyway. The body has these memoirs, and the body is the container for those memoirs. So instead of ignoring those memoirs, let's go right in and give yourself a warning a week ahead of time and say, okay, so what do I need to do? How can I plan? Do I want to take a walk? Do I want to write a letter? It's Mother's Day, it's Father's Day, it's Grandparents' Day, it's Valentine's Day. And these are certainly around the losses of a loved one, but it could also have been the day you were given a cancer diagnosis, the day you were given a diagnosis that basically said you're cancer free now. And to mark those, because the body remembers. If you were diagnosed with diabetes, how did that change your life? If, again, developmentally, you are entering into menopause, or for men, you're dealing with some erectile dysfunction issues, to actually say, when did that happen? And I'm going to write to the parts of me, the aspects, the roles that I may have lost or that I may have be yearning for, that I no longer integrated into my life. And I'm going to talk to these aspects of me and let them know that I miss them, or that I want to support them, and I'm not going to make them invisible.
Yeah. Well, I'm learning so much just from listening to you and hearing all these examples in different ways. How do you normally work with your clients or people? Is it like a group setting? Is it one-on-one? How long are those sessions? What are you looking for or observing when you're working with someone you're trying to help?
You asked a lot of questions.
Sorry
I
for
don't know that I
going
can
off there.
answer them all at once. I think I might have to answer them in some kind of order here,
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
because I think that's actually how our minds work as well. So, I love doing intensives with people, and what that looks like is, it's not a 50-minute session or a 1 hour session. It's like 3 or 4 or 5 hours, and instead of meeting like once a week, maybe we meet once a month, and we do some intensive work. Or sometimes I will work with couples and they're really working with having had multiple miscarriages or one miscarriage, and we'll work it through in a weekend, because what we know is, and when I say we'll work it through, we will work on exercises that can help them co-regulate a very dysregulated time in their lives, teach them more about grief, teach them how they each grieve, because, the expectation often goes that you're going to grieve the way that I grieve, and that
Yeah.
is just not true. And how do you grieve, especially, and I'm going to talk about this very, very tender topic of when a couple loses a child, but they've got other children. And because those other children not only have lost this sibling, but they've also lost their parents in their grief. And so, how to find ways that are carefully sculpted to honor the grief that's in the family, the grief for the couple, and the grief as individuals. That is, it's powerful, and I find that doing intensives around that, because we know that the statistics are pretty high for couples to not make it when they lose a child. So we and I don't have the statistics at my fingertips, but it can be pretty devastating, because there can be blame, there can be regret, guilt, and some self-loathing for not doing it right, or being furious at their their God and their belief systems create a schism. One becomes far more religious, the other not at all. And that schism then creates a greater split. So there's lots of grief can be a separator and it can be a joiner. And we need to find ways to help them honor the way that they each grieve as this, let's say, couple, and how this family needs to grieve. And
We've been talking mostly, well, in my mind, it's been mostly thinking about grief as like an individual experience, but now you've got me thinking about how like a shared grieving process might look like. And I like how you said it can be a joiner or a separator. And I think with the tools, the emotional tools that most people are probably equipped with, they're not equipped to make it a joiner. It's easier to just slip into your habits of blame or self-loathing and cause that negativity to be a separating experience. So, what are the tools or mind frames that you would encourage for like a shared grief experience? Like, what would
well, it's
join?
again, it's not shared. It is shared in that, let's say they've both lost a child.
Yes.
Okay. It is about understanding how they each grieve, and that the way
Okay.
that they grieve may very well be different,
Hmm.
probably because no one really grieves the same way, and no one like gets, some people will stay within their anger, and other people might really be overwhelmed with a phase of anxiety. One may, be really concentrating on forgiveness, while another partner might be concentrating or really kind of within the complexity of being in what I call the first phase, which is the emotional armor phase. So they continue to be numb, and they continue to be really dysregulated, and they just can't seem to get their nervous system, more regulated. And so again, like, everything was going along fine and they were aligned, and then there's this break because no one grieves the same way, and they're just because they're partners doesn't mean they're fused. I hope not,
It sounds like it's about helping the individuals going through it just understand that it is a unique process for
Well, that's
everybody.
the beginning,
Yeah.
and when I've done groups of people who did not know one another, and I love doing groups. My groups, most of them are not in person, they're online, limited to 8 to 10 people, and it's a closed group. And the reason I like closed groups is because for an intimacy to begin, for trust to allow itself to be developed, and on having new people come in every hour, allowing new people to come in every week, and then having them tell their story, I think really interrupts the ability to feel safe and trust. So let's build a group. Let's build confidence in the group that we can build honesty and build integrity into how one grieves, and that there's no judgment on how one grieves. And from integrating role play into these groups and mask making into these groups and finding creative means for grief expression, I think can so very, very helpful in finding other parts of the brain to use as grief finds its way for expression.
Is mask making and role playing the same thing?
No,
What's
mask making is truly the it's a mask that people either can, draw a circle on a piece of paper and there it is. You can create a mask, eyes, nose, mouth, or whatever, and write words or draw. You don't have to be an artist for this. Or in my in-person groups, everyone is given like a paper mask, and they are given, if we're in an intensive, a 2-day, 3-day intensive, then they spend an hour or two really creating a beautiful mask that has many different aspects of what their grief experience is. They then share it, and the sharing of the mask with the group is then taken to another level of role play or psychodrama, and a way to work through and work out some of the relationships, that the loss of the relationship that might have been fragile or special or tender, and have a safe place to express this that's active, rather than just the brain talking about it, that the whole
mm,
body gets engaged.
yeah, there's something when the whole body gets engaged and you're
Yeah,
able to allow those emotions to permeate
that's right.
and
And I think that's when metamorphosis can really happen.
yeah.
That, you've got that in a way the mask is kind of part of having your superpower, and that superpower is being able to use a projective style like mask making, like the letter writing that we suggested. Those are all called, they're kind of like under the auspices of projective techniques. And these projective techniques serve a couple of purposes. One, getting whatever's inside, externalizing it, so it's not just you that's holding it, it's actually now on a mask or a piece of paper. So that's one aspect. But then the other aspect is just the idea that what you're holding doesn't have to be doesn't have to just only be held by you, that you can actually find an expression and it can offer some relief as you're not holding all of it. You're honoring it, you're writing it down while also saying, you know what, right now I can have this paper hold this, and I can just take a breath, and I can let it go just for a moment. And it's not about forgetting ever, because you're not going to forget. It is about learning how to remember more peacefully.
Oh, I see. Okay. So instead of projecting like in a letter or a conversation or role play, you're projecting onto the physical object.
Yeah.
Yeah. What other techniques are there besides projection? Or
So, one of the things that I'm hearing you focus on are techniques and strategies.
yes,
And the
like
thing
what's
is,
the how to?
and there's no one right how to.
Yes.
So if someone is having trouble sleeping, there are, relaxation meditations, going online and listening to YouTube Native American drumming or
Hmm.
flute playing, so that you can get into a rhythm that is just a beautiful, beautiful rhythm to help the dysregulated self get a little bit more regulated. Reaching out to friends and family, perhaps talking to a therapist, or a beloved, safe person, or someone within your spiritual community. There's no one right way, and there's no one right tool. There's breath work, breathing. I'm a big believer in breathing. People, when you're dealing with grief, a lot of times the anxiety is one of the phases, that anxious phase. It just keeps coming in. But if you're feeling that anxious, there's a really good chance that you haven't expressed anger. And so you start to feel anxious I'd love for you all to say, oh, I'm feeling anxious. What am I not expressing regarding my anger? What do I what do I need to locate within myself where anger might exist? How does my anger fortify me? How does my anger get me up in the morning? How does my anger maybe keep me down? But what is my anger doing for me? And if you can tap into the anger, chances are some of that anxiety is going to dissipate.
I don't think I've ever heard emotions explained in that way before, where anxiety is just not pure anxiety. It's actually the result of
Not
repressed.
always. Not
Yeah.
always. I mean, sometimes it can be.
Yeah.
Sometimes, frankly, I can get a terrible anxiety attack if there's been an MSG in my food. And all of a sudden, I'm not
Yeah.
sleeping and I'm anxious and I don't know why because I can't imagine that there would have been MSG. And sure enough, I'll go to that package and there it is. And so sometimes anxiety is just anxiety, and maybe it has to do with something, some food that we've put into our bodies. And we forget about that. So it's just a really, and then sometimes, anxiety is a response to a projection that we have created, a story that we are telling ourselves that we haven't yet met, and we're imagining an outcome that hasn't yet happened. It may be predicated on something that did happen, but and then we're building a whole scenario, and that's anxiety, which is usually about projection. It's not about being present in the here and now. One of the greatest ways to break an anxiety is to start to breathe. And people who deal with anxiety often say, oh my God, I feel like I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, what am I going to do? I feel like I can't breathe. And all I'm saying, going to ever say to them, if we're in session, is hold your breath. Oh no, I'm not breathing. Hold your breath. Now, if I tell you, Alex, to hold your breath, then the message that you're telling your brain is, if I can hold my breath, then I must be breathing.
Yes.
Because if you weren't breathing, you wouldn't be able to hold your breath. Now, it seems ridiculously simple, and yet, in the moment, what is actually happening is your diaphragm and your breathing is truly irregular. And the way to actually begin to regulate that is first to just say, okay, I'm going to hold my breath. And then instead of going back to that breathing that's almost like hyperventilating, you're going to breathe out with a little sizzle. And what that sounds like is this. And I could make that go on and on and on. And you want to get to that point, because letting it go with the sizzle actually is the beginning of some regulation.
Yeah. So kind of like becoming more aware of your body. It sounds like
Well,
becoming.
your body is
Yeah.
speaking to you. Your body is definitely, I don't know about you, but I know when I get really angry and I'm even, and I'm in a fighting mode, as much as I want to have my voice, my throat tightens up to such a degree that I can't speak.
Yeah.
And that's what happens when I'm angry. My throat closes down. So if anybody out there experiences that, then I want you to just stop, and I want you to just hum. And maybe even just say to yourself, I am so angry because I couldn't control my diabetes, this diagnosis, this loss. I'm so angry because the doctors aren't listening. I'm so angry because I have nowhere to go. I'm so angry because work won't give me more time off to grieve. And to even write it down. I'm so angry. I'm so angry. I'm so angry.
You mentioned one thing earlier, um, that you do work with trauma too. What does working with that look like?
Not really any different than the way I work with grief.
Okay.
But the difference is that I think that the prison, the sense of being held captive is very different for someone who's had a predatory event. that has held them, that the response to that predatory event holds them captive and impacts their ability to thrive longer term. I don't know that the grief, the loss of a loved one, necessarily impacts long term how someone thrives. It can, or impacts one's ostensible personal, social, and sexual identities. It can. But with a traumatic event or experience, developmentally speaking, as we age, or the first sexual experience that can make an impact on how one sees themselves as people and how they relate in terms of relationships or their ability to be harness a relationship or to tolerate being loved or have attention or even remember the attention. Because I think that what differentiates my take on grief and my take on the traumatic imprint is what I call the sexual grief effect. And the sexual grief effect is a natural response to a sexually traumatic predatory event or a developmental experience that holds someone captive, so much so that their personal, their social, their sexual identities don't grow, don't thrive, don't have a chance to percolate in the ways that we want them to. And that this holding of the prisoner is like a hostage situation, and that they need to be liberated. And for that, I've developed something called the Liberation Protocol, which I've got the 11 phases, and the 11 phases of grief certainly work with the Liberation Protocol. But the first protocol within the Liberation Protocol is what I call embodied curiosity, which is you are really curious about what it's been like for you to be captive, how the imprint has affected your ability to be to be to be. And this amnesia of love, that what I'm finding is that people who are experiencing the sexual grief effect, that they have this amnesia of love, and it's not about attachment or attachment style, which a lot of people might say, oh well, this is due mainly to like the lack of a healthy attachment. I think that someone could have had a really healthy attachment initially with that parental unit, and then some external force came and invaded them without their permission, forcefully, and took something away that changed the brain to such a degree that the brain and those neural pathways changed. And the amnesia of love is not being able to remember the love object or that really wonderful meeting or that wonderful interview or that some group stood after you spoke and gave you a standing ovation and you don't remember. Not only don't you remember, but you leave empty. And that
Hmm.
is sexual grief. And if you can't remember, then you don't remember how that interview went or that you were applauded, and you don't remember feeling that somebody complimented you and how good that felt. And it felt good in the moment, but the minute that person is gone, the minute you hang up on that cell phone call, it doesn't stay with you. And so the goal is to be fierce about helping people remember the feelings. And so the style of therapy that I do with either the intensives is that I am in touch with my people, and I'll ask them to write to me mid-session, and I will respond if they want me to respond, or if the agreement is I will respond. And if I don't have time to give you the kind of response that I want, I'll say, I read everything you wrote. I need 24 hours to respond. And as long as that's been the agreement, then that's the agreement.
The last time we spoke, we touched briefly on this too, and
Yeah.
it's something that you're developing.
Yes.
I'm curious, like, how does, because you mentioned the word hostage, and I think
I
you
did.
mentioned the word last time of like negotiating. with yourself? How do you, how I am myself, so if I'm like, okay, free the hostage, isn't it just free the hostage? How does one like start that negotiating
Well, the
process?
negotiation is actually beginning with an embodied curiosity. The liberation protocol is really you becoming a negotiator with yourself and with the parts of you that are held captive, hostage by the external forces that you had no control over that changed your life. And so it's like, okay, so when do you show up? When do I feel the most captive, held captive?
Okay.
And how am I functioning at work? How am I functioning in my relationship? What am I like with my kids? If you had kids, how do I function in terms of self-care? And okay, so I decided that I'm gonna like exercise and I wanna take off 5 pounds. And but when I start to when I am activated by a smell in the air that reminds me of the predator, then I end up going back into the prison, or I feel very, very stuck. And how can I now say that was a smell that was from another time, and I'm going to smell something else that reminds me of joy? I'm going to be curious about where I got activated within my body, and how can I not only notice it, but notice it in such a way that my noticing it allows my body and my brain to know that I'm not ignoring, I'm not sidestepping, I'm not avoiding, because when we avoid, things just get bigger. I'm actually gonna take care of, and maybe that means I'm gonna take that walk that got interrupted.
Continuing to live your life or not letting it interrupt your life.
Well, and whatever that life looks like, because it's not
Yeah.
gonna, it's it's the initial hostage negotiation in true form. When these hostage negotiation strategies were created by Chris Voss, what he learned and what he shared with everyone is you first got to let the hostage taker know that you want to know about them. Because if you're going to ask them to come out and free the hostages and ultimately get arrested but save the hostage taker's life, then you need to let them know that there's some kindness and curiosity about who they are, where they came from, what got them into the place that they're in. And so you're really doing that with yourself.
What do you think it is about that 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 empathy that causes a switch in the hostage takers
So
program?
curiosity is not yet empathy. Curiosity and the embodied curiosity is just the questions, because there's a good chance that the hostage taker, no one's ever asked them about themselves. The empathy develops in, God, this must be so hard. It's really like imagining, it's a subjective point of view, imagining what it's like to be them. And so as the, we could do a really deep dive in this, and I don't know that we've really got the time, but the empathy is, there's a co-mixture of empathy and compassion. Okay, so the empathy is that subjective, this has got to be so hard for you. I'm imagining what it's like for you to be there in this prison. I'm imagining what it's like for you to have been taken without your permission. And the hostage taker is the experience, is the event that happened.
Okay.
That is the hostage taker. And
Yeah.
it lives within the souls of people who've experienced predatory events.
That makes sense.
And then the empathy isn't going to, it's the beginning to help some movement. Compassion is, I see that you're in this prison, and I know that you want to feel liberated, and I know you want liberation. If I make the key for you, that might look like compassion, but actually it's not. because I'm not really helping you get out of there. So if the prison, let's say, is in a hole, then I'm going to throw you down some things that's going to help you build a ladder. And I'm going to build a ladder to meet you halfway. And then I'm going to offer you my hand.
I love that.
And that's compassion,
Yeah.
is being able to teach someone to be more differentiated and to have the power to begin to move themselves, but to know that they don't have to do it alone.
Well, Edie, thank you so much for this enlightening conversation. I feel like I just want to keep asking you more questions. What's the best way for people to get in touch with you if they want to ask you
Certainly.
questions or work with you?
So I want to say also, if you go onto my website, there's a course that's being given through End Science, and it is for clinicians, but I also think it's great for the layperson. So it's through End Science, and it's a wonderful 3-module course. My website is edynathan.com, also sexualgrief.com. And if you want to become part of the Sexual Grief Project, let me know. Write to me. You have full access to me, just emailing me through those 2 sites. You can also join me on Substack, and you can join me and read my articles from Psychology Today. That's
Awesome.
it.
Well, thanks, Edie.
Thank you so much, Alex.
Yeah.
This was a pleasure.